So you just had your baby and you're at that 6-week postpartum mark and you went to that follow-up appointment where your provider gave you that all clear to return to activity. But they most likely gave you little to no guidance on how to do that and you're wondering what that actually means. That's what I'm going to tell you in this video. My name is Amanda. I'm a doctor of physical therapy and a pelvic floor physical therapist. In my practice here in Arvada, Colorado, I work with women weekly, helping them to stay active through pregnancy and especially return back to those workouts and exercises and activities that they love postpartum, free of pain, free of some of those common pelvic floor symptoms. And in this video, I'm going to tell you what we work on, especially at that 6-week mark or when they come to see me after that all clear from their provider. Make sure you listen until the end, because if you are looking for a done for you plan that takes the guesswork out of it and you don't have to figure it all out on your own, I'm going to tell you what that looks like at the end of this video. What I think is first important to understand is what is actually happening healing wise at that 6-week mark postpartum, and especially why it has gotten this hype around it, or why it's just such a well-known milestone in your healing postpartum. At 6 weeks, what we know about tissue healing principle is that any damage that was done to tissue because of pregnancy and especially from labor and delivery has now healed enough that we feel confident you won't re-damage it. So that includes that tissue damage that happens where the placenta separates from your uterus on the inside. Also any incisions, either because of a cesarean delivery or because we needed some sort of assistance to deliver vaginally, or any perineal or other tearing that happened from a vaginal delivery. When we need to heal a tissue damage in the body sends scar tissue in, and that is what heals tissue damage. And at 6 weeks, we know that enough scar tissue has laid down and that it has built up strength enough that you are likely not going to re-damage the tissue. And what I want you to understand is that at that 6 weeks mark, that tissue healing is the bare minimum of healing, right? It's the bare minimum stage of like, okay, we have tissue healing. That's it. It doesn't mean that the rest of the system is ready to support you. And it doesn't mean that just because of that tissue healing, everything else is safe enough for you to jump back into your old workouts, especially jumping back into lifting heavy, things that are impact activities like running or jumping, anything that takes excessive load down into your pelvic floor, or takes excessive strength to keep you safe from your core and your pelvic floor. It doesn't mean that we have gotten that whole system working back together again. And that's what we're going to talk about in this video quite a bit. And so when we talk about what is safe is likely not your old levels of workouts or even your old types of workouts yet. We have some work to do to make sure that that other foundational stuff is in place, way more than simply just saying your tissue is healed, good luck, go figure it out. And so what I want to talk to you about for the rest of this video is what that first stage of postpartum rehab and postpartum return to activity should actually look like. What that first stage is going back to your regular forms of exercise, your regular workouts. A lot of people, I'll hear them say like, I'm going to go back to it, but I'm going to take it easy, or I'm going to work back in slowly. But that's not taking into account building back in what I call that foundational strength, so that when you go back to your regular workouts, running, lifting, cycling, HIIT classes, you get to do it relatively worry-free so that it can feel fun and empowering and very safe, and you feel very strong in those activities, instead of the worry that comes with, am I doing too much? Am I going to hurt myself? Am I doing things correctly? Am I going to deal with pelvic floor symptoms down the road because of this? All of those worries that I hear women have. If we stop and we take this first foundational step, this first foundational stage, and take the time to rebuild back in that foundational strength, then we get to go back to our workouts without that worry and without that burden. And that is, we're going to talk about what the steps of that stage look like for the rest of this video. The very first step of this stage of healing, or this foundational stage of healing and return to exercise, is simply just working on making sure the whole system is working together again. And by system, I mean, we know that we want the core and the pelvic floor and your diaphragm and your breathing and your hip stabilizers and even your shoulder stabilizers, your neck stabilizers. The whole system has a job to work together as a team. What you're probably probably used to is never needing to think about that, because hopefully it was happening in the background for you without you ever worrying about what that whole stabilization and pressure management system was doing in the background. That's how it's supposed to be. But we need to take a minute and make sure that it is still working together as a team before we move on and start overloading things or stressing the system. Because it might be that one part of the system is doing awesome and that can sustain you for just a little bit, but if the whole system isn't working together, if one part of the system isn't doing its job optimally or working with the rest of the team, then we're going to create problems down the road. So stopping in that initial very first step of this stage of healing and making sure that whole system works together is usually where I actually see patients get their very first win of just feeling stronger. Because without actually even spending time to progressively overload tissues, to build strength into the system, if you're walking around postpartum and doing things around the house and going on walks and some of those things that you're probably already early on doing, and you don't have a system that's working together as a whole, that's going to naturally innately feel like there's some weakness and we're not feeling as strong and as resilient as we usually do. But what I see for patients is that they get this first win when the whole system finally like clicks together and all the teams start working together again. They just turn this corner of like, I feel supported already, or I feel a little bit more like myself already. And it's that first big win of feeling stronger simply because the system is working together again. And imagine if we just blew past that stage and just started overloading the tissues, you might stick with that feeling for months or years to come of feeling like, I just don't feel supported. I see that a lot. I get patients who come to see me who are sometimes 2 years postpartum, and they got that 6-week all clear from their doctor. They went back into their regular workouts, whatever that workout was for them. They worked back into it slowly because that's the only guidance that they got from their doctor. And they're seeing me 2 years postpartum, they're like, I just would have thought by now that I would be back to feeling like I did before, or I would be back to feeling supported and symptom-free or pain-free with my workouts, and I don't yet. And when we check on it, it's like, ooh, postpartum, we never got the entire team working together again, so we have to go back and do that still. And so that's always the first step of that initial stage of postpartum return to exercise or return to activity, is getting the whole team coordinated together again. If you want to know a little bit more about what I mean by that, that is a big part of my free core and pelvic floor class that I have available that you can watch on demand. The link to access that course is going to be in the description of the video. So if that sounds like something that you're like, I don't even think I did that stage, and you want to know more about what that means, then you can check that link and go ahead and watch that free class. It's a great place to start. The next step in this foundational rehab stage for return to activity postpartum is to check in on muscle recruitment patterns and movement patterns. And we want to retrain those and make sure that they're all happening appropriately. But more so, we know there are very specific patterns that get thrown off during pregnancy. And so realize that pregnancy in general, pregnancy all by itself, tends to throw those off because we have a changed center of gravity. We have a core that is very stretched out and harder for our brain to access. We have a pelvic floor that now, instead of just simply controlling our coughs and controlling our sneezes and our pressure management all day, it's also having to hold up this growing uterus and growing baby. So it has this extra job that it's doing. And so we have a lot of things that have to happen during pregnancy that can tend to throw off these movement patterns and muscle recruitment patterns that we know are what we need to be optimal to support you and to help you feel strong and help you feel resilient, especially in your workouts. And so one thing that I want you to realize about those patterns, and what I see women experience and have cause a little doubt in this stage, is that when we have weird patterns, when we have patterns that we're like using muscles for what they weren't really meant to be used for, or we change the movement pattern, but it is fine, we're still doing the thing. Those movement and muscle recruitment patterns might still serving you well in the short term because it gives you this quick, well, this feels strong, like this feels okay for now, but those are the patterns that will cause problems down the road. Those are the patterns that we want to interrupt and correct as soon as possible, because those compensatory patterns that our body chooses to do instead when we don't take the time to retrain the correct ones will feel okay at first, and that is a problem. I wish they didn't feel so okay at first, because it's not going to be until down the road that you start to feel symptoms or you start to feel pain, And then when you go see somebody to address what you're feeling, we track it back to, ooh, we never relearned how to use the inner core system for support. We've been using the outer core and the big movers of your core for support instead. Or we never relearned how to lengthen and shorten the pelvic floor when it's supposed to lengthen and shorten. Or we never got back to hip hinging in a really good pattern, and so now we've got low back pain. So there are all these compensatory patterns that please realize that if we don't take the time to retrain the correct patterns, then the wrong ones really do have a tendency to feel okay at first. They're just not going to serve you for the long term, especially if you're someone who has very specific workout goals that you want to get back to. The very last step of this initial postpartum return to activity stage, this foundational stage of rehab, is that then we get to progressively overload the movement patterns, muscle recruitment patterns. So now we have the whole system is working together the way it's supposed to. That at this stage for most people is happening without them even having to think about it. I'm watching them when I see them doing stuff to make sure it's still happening, but I'm not even asking them to think about it anymore because that's the automatic stuff that we want just happening to take some of the mental load off of movement for you. But we have the system working together. We have the brain choosing the correct movement patterns and the correct muscle recruitment patterns for certain activities. And now we get to progressively overload all of that. So this is where we start adding more reps to things, more resistance, either with body weight or bands or weights, whatever is appropriate for that person. But we start to overload those things because the more we overload, it serves two purposes. One, it solidifies those patterns. When we overload and we do rep after rep and we add resistance to what you're doing, it solidifies those patterns so that, again, it takes the thinking out of it. Those become your automatic patterns. Those become your go-to patterns that your body chooses to do so that when you go back to your regular workouts, you no longer have to think about them or you don't have to pay as much attention to them. And the second purpose that it serves is that we're building resiliency back into your system. So we're overloading tissues, we're overloading muscles, we're overloading your joints so that they start to come in and build some strength and build some resiliency, which is what is going to also serve. It's the second half of what's going to serve to keep you injury and symptom free when you go back into your workouts. And this is sometimes the stage where we start to differentiate for people like, okay, you specifically want to get back to running, you specifically want to get back to lifting, you want to get back to Orange Theory or a different form of a HIIT class. And so we might bias what some of that overload looks like. So we're overloading the system in a way that prepares it for the activity that you want to get back to. But at the end of the day, everyone needs that systematic, progressive overload with the correct patterns, with the whole system working together so that we can solidify the patterns and we can build that resiliency back into the body, which are both what's going to serve you to go back to your workouts injury and symptom free. So if all of this feels a little bit overwhelming, which it absolutely can when you're trying to plan this out for yourself, I want you to know that I have an online program that walks you through this step by step. It's Conquer Core Foundations, and it is aimed to be a postpartum return to exercise program that you can follow along on your own in your own time. It's laid out over 12 weeks, but I give you instructions on how to do it in less time or in more time based on what your schedule and your body needs. It incorporates education and also a workout program to help you go through each of these steps to make sure you're not skipping a step, you're thoroughly completing each step, doing what you need to do so that these patterns and the system is working together, everything automatically, and then we're progressively overloading the system so that it is ready to go when you jump back into your regular workouts. And my goal for that program is that after you're done with it, you're able to go back to your regular forms of workout in a fun and an empowering way without that worry and anxiety of, am I doing everything I need to do? Am I keeping my body safe? Am I going to create an injury? Am I going to create a weird pelvic floor problem that I have to deal with down the road? I don't want any woman going back to their workouts postpartum with any of those worries in their head. And so Conquer Core Foundations lays out the system that you can go through before you jump back into those workouts so that it takes all of those worries away and you know that you did what you needed for your own body. So if you want to know more about Conquer Core Foundations, again, the link is going to be down in the description of this video. If that feels like it's a little bit too much too soon, that free core and pelvic floor class is also a really great place to start, at least to start talking about what systems and what automatic patterns do we really want to see our body doing. And in that free class, I give you some very beginner steps that you can start on as well to start to build those things back in if you feel like they're not already part of what your body is doing automatically. So I hope this video was helpful. I hope it gives you a little bit more clarity on, after that 6-week all clear from my provider, what the heck am I supposed to do, especially if you're someone who has high level workout goals, high level fitness goals that you want to get back to postpartum. I want you to know that it is still so important to take this foundational rehab step before you jump back in. And I hope you really understand why now. So if you have any questions about any of this, feel free to drop them in the comments below, and I will see you next week.